like to call this meeting to order, this regular work session on this Tuesday, October 21st. The clerk will call the roll.
Mayor Wolcott.
Here.
Vice Mayor Hall.
Here.
Councilmember Villanueva. Councilmember Williams.
Here.
Councilmember Tandy. Here. Councilmember Biendo.
Here.
Councilmember Winters.
Here.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you'll all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This regular work session is water everywhere. And so, Terry, I think you're going to do the honors this evening. And Vice Mayor, did you have something that you wanted to say just as an introduction?
Yeah, I want to thank Councilman Williams and Councilman Winters and Terry and his group for some very, I think we had some very productive conversations. Terry had to give us the real world check every once in a while, and but I think what you'll see tonight is a good step toward having a good sustainable water policy, and but we want your input too. Right. You know, we're just three people, and Terry and his group, and we had the consultants present the first phase of the water plan, and they really drilled down with some good detail, I thought. Arcadis, and but Terry can kind of go through that, and then I'm gonna. I guess you're going to turn it to me in a little while about what's going on regionally.
Our second item on the agenda, Vice Mayor, will be, exactly what you're talking about.
Thank you.
Terry?
Okay. Madam Chair, members of council, thank you very much. Our first, actually, does the clerk have to call the first item before I start talking?
I'll be glad to do that. Presentation and discussion updating council on the development of a stormwater utility.
Again, Madam Chair, members of council, tonight's presentation is an update on our stormwater utility process. Earlier this year, you had given, at the time, Public Works the direction to investigate the formation of a stormwater utility. And so tonight, just wanted to give you an update, keep you in the loop as to the process of our development on the project. And so without further ado, I'll get started. This is an actual picture of Cactus Road from our most recent heavy rainstorm that we had. And so it just, again, sort of re-emphasizes the need for something to, some mechanism for us to be able to manage our system. So tonight's agenda, again, I'll recap the reasons for stormwater management very briefly. We've gone through this before. Our current city practices for stormwater, and then an update of our development, of which there's some options there I'd like you to consider, and then some next steps. Again, the reason for stormwater management, really two things we're concerned with, the quantity and the quality of stormwater. Here in the valley, it's more quantity than quality. The quality comes in areas where stormwater is the source of drinking water, where it would go into a river or stream or a reservoir. Where our concern here is mainly quantity. Controlled pollution entering surface waters, that's that quality aspect of it. 1972, the Clean Water Act is what enacted all of the legislation regarding stormwater and stormwater runoff. So the Department of Environmental Quality issues the ZIPDs permit, where we as Surprise have a separate storm sewer system, what they call MS4. So when you hear MS4 being thrown around, and the 6 control measures, the 6 federal minimums: public outreach and education, public involvement, illicit discharge and detection, construction site runoff, post-construction runoff, and pollution prevention and good housekeeping. These are items that we must manage to day in and day out, year in and year out, with relation to stormwater. So within Surprise, we do have an ordinance that was adopted in 2012. We also have a stormwater program where we have a swamp, what they call a stormwater management program. It's a document about as thick as this book right here, that we tell the state, we tell the feds how the city is managing its stormwater. The funding for that comes from various sources. not a dedicated utility. We also have to abide by those 6 federal minimums that are under our MS4 permit. And then also we have capital projects that, again, are part of and funded from other sources. Currently, stormwater is being funded out of general fund, the HERF, and the wastewater funds. The picture there in the lower right-hand corner rather is also from that storm event. So the intent of a stormwater utility: offer a fair, reliable, and adequate funding mechanism for which to provide continued service. Provide a fair and equitable way to pay for stormwater management systems. The key there is a fair way for us to be able to provide a service and recoup some cost. And then also a standalone utility, no general fund or other subsidy from other funding sources. So today, this is the new information, an update since we last met. We, as staff, have forecasted future utility O&Ms. We actually built the business model as it relates to what kind of operations and maintenance we're going to need, potential capital projects that would be funded under this, as well as we brought on FCS Group. They are the group that did our original water, wastewater, and sanitation rate study, and their initial scope was to look at overview of funding sources, analyze possible rate structures, identify any credit or exemptions that could be done for people that manage their water on site, and then review and advise on some fiscal policies. So initially, our consultant looked at possible funding sources. Obviously, general fund is one. Some special assessments similar to SLIDs are also an option. Impact fees. Impact fees work well with initial costs of infrastructure, but are kind of lacking when it comes to the ongoing maintenance and operation of the funds. And then obviously the formation of a utility, which would then be one where we offer a service and charge a rate or a fee to recoup those costs of that service. So with that, the possible rate structures that are out there are a flat fee, obviously, just where regardless of size of your lot, regardless of size of your impervious surface area, you get charged the same amount each and every time. Impervious surface area, this is the one that is most highly recognized, but it's also the one that is most fair. And this is the one where we would develop an equivalent impervious surface area for general residential lots, and then commercial lots, which are generally larger, would be some factor thereof of that residential lot. And runoff coefficients in land use are ones where they get a little tricky in the sense that the rate is based on the characteristic of the land. So if you have your lot slopes a lot, or your soil is of a clay material or some other material that doesn't allow impervious, they get a little bit tricky and can tend to be a little more challengeable with respect to we're looking at each individual lot, and it becomes a difficult approach to manage as well. And then, so moving forward, with your input tonight, we will finalize a fee and/or rate study, and I'll bring back FCS here to talk about the 30 or more slides that they had last time. They may not have this many this time, but to talk about actual rates and how they were developed and the costs. Again, for your review, begin a public education outreach campaign, and then an adoption of an ordinance should one be necessary, and finally implementation of a utility. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Council members, questions? Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Terry, what are you recommending? The impervious area?
We're recommending an impervious.
Okay, so give us an example of a shopping center like Kohl's versus a housing development like Kingswood Park.
Sure. First thing we do when we're talking about an impervious surface area is we start at the residential level, and we'll establish is in what they call an EDU, an equivalent dwelling unit of impervious surface area. So Most houses have a roof and a driveway. That's about it. That's your impervious surface area. And what that'll come to, and the average of throughout the city, we'll look at sample sets throughout the city and establish that there's going to be a square footage of that. Every house is 2,500 square feet, and that'll be citywide. So what we do is then look at, okay, the Kohl's comes in, how many EDUs equivalents is that Kohl's, and they would be charged the rate times the number of EDUs that they are, that we charge one house.
I see. Okay. Interesting. Okay, and then, and you haven't done any kind of projections on what, that's what you'd be coming back to us with?
That is correct. Wanted to bring this information to you to vet out some of these options there. And if I was unclear, I apologize. We're looking at a utility with an impervious service area type of rate. It's fair, it's equitable, it keeps residential as even as possible, where we're not looking at each individual property. But then when it comes to commercial, you take an equivalent of that EDU. The commercial also does get a benefit of potential credits in a sense that if they retain a certain amount of water on their site.
That's what I was going to ask you about, Terry. 'Cause so as it relates to Kingswood Park, I think they got a couple of retention basins, so they would get credit back.
They would get credit back. Everybody will have some base fee because we still have to fund the maintenance. We still have to fund all of the regulatory requirements, the big old notebook that we've got to do.
Yeah.
But they can reduce their rate of what they're charged based on the amount of improvements that they put in on their lot, dry wells and large detention or retention, those types of things.
Councilmember Tandy.
Thank you. That was kind of my preference as well, utility and impervious rates. But I also like what you said about everybody to have a base fee. So maybe a hybrid base fee plus an impervious factor, and also the credits. Reason being is, there are some lots that do have runoff but don't have any impervious space. So how do you assess them for what it is and what makes it fair? So I'd kind of like to look at all of those different things, kind of a hybrid rate and a utility.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Councilmember Biondo.
Thank you. Terry, are you making a distinction between an enterprise fund and a utility fund, or are those synonymous?
They're the same. A utility is an enterprise fund.
Okay.
Okay. No further questions?
I have a question.
Councilmember Villanueva.
I'm not sure if this is the right item to ask this question, but remember we had some rain work done on Citrus and 183rd Avenue in that area. Is that completed, or how did that work?
Councilmember Villanueva, I will have to look into that. I'm not sure the status of that work.
Okay, thank you.
One more question.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Back to Todd's or Councilman Tandy's point. Like a raw piece of land, let's just pick one, Litchfield and Greenway, southwest corner. That's just how would you base that into the EDU?
Vice Mayor, there's two ways to look at raw land. There's raw native land where most likely we won't charge anybody anything. Possibly, we'll have to look into that. And there's raw land that's been improved, i.e. a pad has been placed, it's been engineered of some kind, different runoff coefficients apply there. And so our consultant is looking at, is it beneficial for us to charge an improved lot versus a raw lot? What kind of runoff comes off of a raw land, raw native desert? There's ways to look at that.
Okay.
We have our opinions on that way. If you improve native desert to something other than what it once was, what Mother Nature created, you are affecting the runoff by improving that land. And so we'd have to look at, possibly again with that EDU component built into that EDU, is there a base amount that a lot like that or an owner like that would be charged to cover what comes off their land, because it's not all percolating in because it was engineered, versus native desert, which has the possibility of percolating a lot of runoff.
So Terry, when you come back to us, you'll have those broken out with the thought process that justifies.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Tandy.
Thank you. A few follow-up points. I'd like for it to also be objective, so it's not easily questioned whether or not, I've got this or that, so it's objective. The other point would be that it's fair and it's equitable. So those, and also one last point, simple to administer for the staff and simple for people to understand.
Absolutely, thank you.
One question I'm asking, just on behalf of the residents who ask me these types of questions. What happens when you create a stormwater facility that captures the stormwater, and then what? Where does it go, and how do we manage that stormwater runoff as a city, and how can we build into our facilities a way of perhaps even capturing it permanently and re-injecting it for our own benefit?
Mayor, I think there's a couple questions in there. Let me see if I can.
There were.
See if I
there
can
were, but they're all related.
Absolutely, they are all related. If historically, the way the valley was engineered is that water is detained on site for a period of time at a certain storm rate, and then it is allowed to go back to its historical flow. More recently, Surprise is actually going forward and required 100% of all stormwater to be retained on some lots. Now, when that came into play, I'll have to actually look into, but I understand that is the new as a new practice. So where does it go after that? Hopefully, it stays right where it's at and doesn't get into the system. To which there would be some credit given back to that owner. But historically, we and engineers in the valley say that runoff is intended to go someplace historically, and so it's detained for the heavy part of the rain, which is usually within the first couple hours, and then after that, it'll enter the system. And in our case, the system is most likely roadways, and flow on down to where it was intended to go, and leave the city. What we're finding is that those areas around Surprise are not improved, and so it backs up. And so what we've got to do is we've got to manage the water molecules in place so that they are not of a public health and safety issue. And so I'm not sure if I answered all of the questions in there, but the intent here is to manage that water to help it, corral it, to get it to go where it was intended to go historically, and or stay on its site. But we need to make sure that our system is in place and is robust enough to handle that.
And it's hard for us to look into our crystal ball and predict what the weather will bring, but when we get successive 100-year storms year after year, it starts to look like a trend. Yep. Mm-hmm. And the issue is, I've experienced a couple of places where after a major storm, we discover that a development might have put in a pipe to nowhere, and so they thought they were covered. They thought that there was part of the runoff system. It was draining properly, but lo and behold, the pipe ended. Sure. with no plan for how to distribute the water. So that ends up impacting everybody else. So I just want to make sure that as we move forward as a community, that the residents understand that we're on it, we're on top of it, we're trying to make certain that kind of thing never happens again. But if we can find a way to collect the water and re-inject it into the system and make certain that it's to the benefit of our residents, because water is a precious commodity, no matter what condition it's in, that it's to our benefit to keep it here and keep it under our control.
Sure.
Vice Mayor?
But one thing the mayor asked he didn't answer is the water that goes in the street and gets collected, where does it end up?
The water that goes in the street?
Yeah.
It will flow to the nearest retention basin or follow the street down to wherever it can daylight. Water, sort of goes where it wants to go. The development collects its half-street runoff, presuming that there is catch basins allowable for it. But again, if it, let's say it runs down Reams Road, between Cactus and Peoria, it goes to the end of Reams. Peoria doesn't have the conveyance on the other side of it. And so we've got to figure out a way to manage that water so that it continues on where it needs to go safely, whether that means some other kind of basin or work with our neighbors to the south to allow them to put in infrastructure that'll send that water to an open area where it can spread out and dissipate.
Okay.
There's endless possibilities. It's just a matter of how much investment we want to do with it.
Yeah, okay. So you look at those, you know where the problem areas are right now?
We do.
Okay.
Yep.
And so the plan would be this stormwater utility would fund those improvements so that it wasn't a hazard.
That's
or
correct.
Public health
Mhm.
question, okay.
Maintenance and operation of our system, as well as capital investment to correct areas where we have, pooling.
Everyone covered their questions? Okay, thanks, Terry, very much.
Thank you.
Next item.
This is a presentation and discussion pertaining to Water Subcommittee current events.
Now, Vice Mayor. I'm sorry, I jumped the gun.
Like I said, I want to extend my thanks to Councilman Williams and Councilman Winters for all their contributions in our meetings. And Terry brought in some very good speakers. We had the Arizona Department of Water Resources, Mike Lacey, come and speak about what's going on with the state, which I'll share with you. But his staff did a great job. He also had community development come in and speak about some things, and code enforcement, which related to water, which changed, well, at least it changed my mind. I had some ideas about some things, and they kind of gave me a real world check. And so anyway, I just appreciate all the input we've had, and we meet once a month for an hour and a half, and sometimes we have a resident there, sometimes we don't have anybody there. And I'm putting this word out to Nancy Collins. Nancy, you got to come to one of our meetings. She hounded me about wanting to come to one of our meetings, and she just never makes it. But anyway, and appreciate any input you guys have regarding anything that we say, because it's sure not written in stone, and it sure, we have limited brain power, and we understand that. So, but I think we're making some good initial steps, and Terry can go through those. And okay, Terry?
Great. Thank you, Vice Mayor, Mayor, members of council. Tonight's presentation and discussion is really what Vice Mayor had mentioned, sort of an update of how far we've come as a committee. We've presented to you our consultants' results and recommendations last time. Putting some updates and some progress to all of those recommendations, as well as to talk about a few observations that we're seeing as it relates to water, and asking you to take a hard look at investing in our water future. So quickly, we'll just touch upon a couple of updates of regional issues, and actually, I believe Vice Mayor already mentioned that, and so I'll skip over that slide when we get to it. But the strategic vision for water and surprise, refresher, and an update of what the subcommittee has been working on, and then as well looking into the future. And so, Vice Mayor.
Thanks, Terry. I'm just going to go through this because I don't want to miss anything. A couple of things are going on in the West Valley. West Caps, in partnership with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, is in the process of conducting a basin study for the West Valley. The West Salt River Basin Study will be done by the summer of 2016. This study will include 1, projections of water supply and demand, and including an assessment of risks to the water supply relating to climate change. 2, the analysis of how existing water and power infrastructure and operations will perform in the face of changing water realities, such as population growth and climate change. 3, the development of options to improve operations and infrastructure to supply adequate water in the future. And 4, a trade-off analysis of the options identified, finding and recommendations as appropriate. So that's the West Cap study. The state, Arizona Department of Water Resources, they're working on 7 different areas. One is they're working on the non-Indian agricultural priority cap water. Okay. 2, they're working on reclaimed water reuse for which there is not yet delivery or storage infrastructure constructed to put it to direct or indirect use. 3, they're working on groundwater in storage, both potable and brackish supplies. And 4, the water supplies developed from revised watershed management practices. Okay, and that's a bigger deal than you think, because there's a situation called sublimation that happens. If you get snow on a tree, and if it's too dense, instead of turning to liquid, it turns to gas. It's called sublimation, and so we really need to thin our forests, and so that it melts and drops down in water and goes into the river, et cetera. So water supplies developed through weather modifications. They're looking at that. Water supplies developed from large scale or macro rainwater harvesting and stormwater capture, which Terry talked about a little earlier. And then finally, the importation or exchange of new water supplies developed outside of Arizona. The example is desalination. Okay, so they're really working on moving ahead with a desalination plan. Okay, but as this relates, I'll just throw this out so you understand the context here. I just read an article where Carlsbad, California has a private-public partnership in place where the County of San Diego is contracted with a private contractor desalination plant, and it's $1,000 an acre foot. So the San Diego contracted for 56,000 acre feet for, I think, 20 years. They guaranteed at $1,000 an acre foot. So desalination is still expensive as heck. Okay, so that it's only one piece of the puzzle here in terms of supply. So that kind of gives a regional look. So go ahead, Tara.
Great, thank you, Vice Mayor. So what we've got is our roadmap, and I'll keep bringing this up until we have green check marks all the way across the board there. So what we updated the Integrated Water Master Plan first phase. We're working on scopes of work for the second phase and the infrastructure component of it, as well as policy adoptions, which we will talk about tonight with our first policy for your review. So what is our strategic plan? A little bit of a recap again. It's our policy, it's our planning documents, it's also the water portfolio itself. And so provides us, surprise, with the foundation for sustainable water management. That's the key, that's our intent. What will the strategic plan do? Or provide staff to guidance to staff, allow for proper formation of adoption and executed water-related initiatives, any programs that staff may have, as well as direction in which the city can build our portfolio. What are areas of importance? What are areas where we can let them go and focus in on others? This is a little bit of new information. Since we last met, the Water Subcommittee has determined that these 6 areas will be the policy areas that we will bring back to you for review. And we'll do probably one every other month, and then final adoption of the complete 6 of policies. So water conservation we'll talk about tonight. The use of reclaimed water. Reclaimed water is a valuable resource. And here in Arizona, since we don't have a place to discharge it, it's a commodity, and so what do we want to do with it? Water acquisition, meaning the purchase of new sources of water within the state, out of the state, being a stockholder in some plant someplace. Land use water management. This comes into the development side of things. What do we do? How do we get the water when development comes in? Is there water available to be brought in with that development? Should we require development to bring water with them? Ways to look at that. Funding avenues. We'll work with finance closely on developing ways in which we can fund the first 4 that I just read. And then infrastructure, and infrastructure really is the plumbing itself. And how are we going to look at plumbing for whether it's reclaimed, whether it's new development, whether it's new water, bringing new water sources, or plants online that will treat water from various or different sources than we currently use today. So right off the bat, this is kind of the good news and what we already know. Our designation of assured water supply, that is our wet water allocation. Again, the state provides that for us. The designation states that we as the City of Surprise have available to us 16,718 acre feet a year available to us. We currently use, as a water provider, this talks about the areas that we as Surprise provide water to. It does not include EBCOR or El Mirage. Our demand, our usage is about 7,700 acre feet. In population number, that equates to about 45,000 people in the area there. So what that means and what this slide is showing is that our designation is 16,000. We currently use about 7,700. So we're about halfway. We have capacity within our designation where we could bring on new development and new demand up to a point. And so and therefore right now, the assured water supply states that we have renewable sources up to that amount. So the difference is that we're recharging that delta up until it becomes a demand, in which case we don't get the benefit of that recharge. Feel free to interrupt me from here on out. It's going to get a little confusing. I hope to make it not confusing, but we're trying to equate the message so that we recognize that we're not in trouble yet, but it's be in our best interest to prepare for the future. Yes,
So
ma'am.
here's where I will interject, just for the viewing audience at home, relating that number of 45,344 to our total population, which is about 125 plus thousand. And so once again, to remind people that not everybody in the City of Surprise actually receives their water from the City of Surprise. It's actually, we are the minority partner in terms of providing water for our residents. So that might help you equate to how much we still could grow and still have the allocation to manage that capacity. And so I will continue to interrupt.
Please do.
Because I have tons of questions.
Sure.
So, but that is one thing that I just wanted to point out.
Absolutely.
And
Okay.
Councilmember Winters has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Terry, this does not include this water resource, the current Surprise service area. That does not include EBCOR service, right?
That is correct. EBCOR has their own. They don't have a designation assured water supply because they don't fall into that category. But this only is Surprise as a service provider. That's correct.
And so just to be clear, how many other water service providers are that are actually active right now? Not owners of water, but water service suppliers.
Within the Surprise planning area, we have 11 others.
11
Yeah, there's
different
12 total,
water
including
providers. And that includes the City of Surprise, and that includes the City of El Mirage.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Okay.
Most of the three largest are ourselves, El Mirage and EBCOR. North of our Surprise proper area, there are smaller providers of, cooperative of associations. At one point in time, they got together and said, we're going to be a company and we're going to sell the water to us. And so there's several of those up in our planning area. So here's where it gets a little bit of fun. Our consultant, way back when, took a look at our planning area and identified all of the potential developments that came in, as well as our projected populations from MAG. Our planning area projections, if recall, were 2009. It hasn't changed very much. The developments that we had identified then are about the same. And looking at the growth at that time, as well as the projections that are still fairly strong today, the big blue blob and the colored lines below are water resources, available sources of water that we use to maintain that safe yield. We take this water, it's of a renewable source, and we put it in the ground someplace, and then we pull out of the ground what we need. The line is the demand, and At the time, 2025 was sort of that magic crossing line. Based on our growth, based on the land use assumptions of where people were going to be. And moving down to the future, right around 2060 was the projections of when all these developments were going to primarily be built out. And as you can see, there's a delta there. Today, we know that the growth is not that extensive, so that line, the crossing line, is going to happen. It's just a matter of where it's going to happen. So if we put that into, actually, I want to stop for a second here and take a look at this one slide I thought was kind of interesting. This is a 1987 projection by MAG for the city of Surprise. And if you take a look at the bottom line for 2010, it showed that our population was projected to be 16,000 people. And so as I project forward, these are snapshots in time as it relates to populations, and I equated that, and I turned that designation of assured water supply into population with some nominal growth within the designation. It accounts for growth, and so as growth occurs, our designation will move up, presuming we have the renewable resources to account for it. One would think that population goes up, the reclaimed water that comes out also goes up, and so that blue line there accounts for a nominal increase of our designation, which, by the way, only occurs every 10 years. And so we look at, it comes in 2010, we readjust in 20, 30, 40, 50, and so on. So if we take our population projections there, the green line is MAG projections for our water service area. And as we saw on the previous slide, we're good. The population in our service area goes up, our designation goes up, there's some room to grow. But the MAG projections for the Surprise city limits, as well as the planning area, are the two red lines above the blue line. And that is where, as you can see, we have some issues. And so it's in our best interest to make sure that green line, we keep that blue line well above that green line, and maybe one day that blue line will equal that red line. And if I've confused you with colors, I think I just confused myself. But the goal here is to make sure that the green line does not come close to or cross that blue line. If we did nothing today and that blue line was stagnant, we didn't do anything associated with our designation, we would cross, the green line would cross the blue line. And the only way to get that blue line to go up like this is to invest in our system, in our resources, so that we don't have an issue where we do not have that buffer with respect to being able to bring in new development, commercial or residential. So any
And Terry,
questions on that?
yeah.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Tandy.
Thanks. The earlier charts, you were also excluding EPCOR and El Mirage. Does this chart also exclude EPCOR and El Mirage and all the other water providers in their areas? Or is this the entire planning area of Surprise, that the city of Surprise will be competing for these water resources with EPCOR, El Mirage, and all the other water companies?
This takes into account the two red lines, various shades, takes into account the total population, and this is where my previous slide sort of weighs merit. It's projections. It's a snapshot in time. As far as competing for resources, we wouldn't compete for resources. We would be competing for that growth in those areas, because if we don't have the water, then someone else is going to get that growth.
Right.
The two red lines again are for our full Surprise planning area as well as limits.
The point I'm trying to make, though, is somebody, whether it's the city of Surprise or EPCOR or one of the other water companies, for those population numbers to go up, it's going to need to be provided by somebody. So this is the total concept, rather than the earlier charts had this separate.
This is total.
Makes
Absolutely.
sense to me. Thanks.
And on that note, because these providers that would be accounted for in the red line can create their own growth pressure because they want to sell their commodity. So this is why I think that we need to have a really clear picture of how big we really want to be when we grow up.
That's right.
because we could have other of our friends and neighbors and competing water providers that could push us to grow larger than we actually want to grow. And that's a discussion that I think that we're going to need to really have big picture vision discussion about that magic number of how big is big enough. And we'll have that at the summit. So I think this is really an important presentation to kind of set the stage for that discussion. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. The line down at the bottom, I want to make sure we all read that asterisk.
Yes.
It assumes an investment in portfolio to increase our designated water supply 5,000 acre feet every 10 years.
That's correct. It is a nominal amount, one that may be achievable, but if we don't have a renewable resource to apply to our designation, the number doesn't go up.
Yeah, right. And what was the percentage? Refresh my memory, and for the whole council, the consultant Arcadis assumed 50% yield out of reclaim versus water use at the beginning, and then went to 65% later on.
That is correct. Meaning the assumption was that every drop of water that was delivered as a potable source, 50% came back to the plant, was treated, and is used as a reclaimed source.
Right.
In the end, the assumption would be that through programs that we develop, that we can raise that to about 65%.
Okay. All right.
Councilmember Williams.
No, and Mayor made the point I was going to make, because this is, I mean, if this was a movie right now, there'd be like really dramatic music playing in the background about how monumental, regardless of what graph you look at, whether it's this one or the previous one, and then what we've been discussing on the water committee that Vice Mayor Hall's been leading. I mean, this issue is so critical in terms of the decisions we make now and the impact it has on our children and our grandchildren. And it's just unbelievably important, probably more so than anything that we're really discussing. If you wanted to really prioritize, it's going to determine and dictate how we develop, but it's also, we need to go both feet in. We really need to look at investing, and I'm glad Vice Mayor pointed out the little asterisk there, because this is assuming investment, but we need to, if we're really thinking ahead and thinking about when we're long gone, we need to think past that. Okay, how can we control that? Because Councilmember Tandy, you mentioned the other water providers. Well, we can't totally rely on them. We have to really focus on what we can control, and then we have to set the tone, and we have to be the model, and then those other providers need to follow in suit after us.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? This is a slide I want to etch in my brain, and because I think it tells a really important story, and something that needs to inform us long into the future. This is really critical. I agree with John. The dramatic background music is playing. I can hear it in my mind. So this is a biggie.
Okay, so moving on, state of water and surprise. What the consultant, the biggest recommendation that we took away from the update is that we need to put the wet water back in the ground where it was originally taken out of.
Terry,
Yes.
don't jump ahead on this, because like John said, these kind of things, this is a big deal.
Yes.
Right here.
That's why I started at the bottom of the slide.
Why is it a big deal?
Okay, the reason it's a big deal is that the key is we can't rely on groundwater as a source, but it is our source. And so in order to be able to utilize that water that comes out of the ground, we have to put it back. And the key is that area of hydrologic impact. The big black bold statement is really what the area of hydrologic impact means. We need to put it back in an area close to where we take it out. Surprise has done a fantastic job in recharging as much as effluent, as percentage-wise, more so than anybody in the valley and in many other areas. But we're putting it into a one location, a point load, if you want to call it, that's currently at our south plant. Fantastic area, but it's the southern portion of our city. We need to get this water to the area and near in the vicinity of where the wells are pulling it out. And that ensures that we will have a wet water supply. And then it also ensures just what we're getting right now is that we also get our long-term storage credit. And that's the retirement account in water. It's long-term, it's one-time use, but it's there, and we grow that bank in times where we don't have the renewable sources. Our designation will kick in and says, okay, this is your ceiling, and based on your retirement account, you can then withdraw from that account up to this ceiling. So we currently have 20,000 acre feet in the bank. That gives us about a year if we were to utilize 100% of our designation. We need to grow that bank so that we have some amount of years. I will be bringing that before council to determine what is that rainy day, lack of a better term, rainy day fund for water.
Right, exactly.
So,
But Tara, here's the thing, and refresh my memory too, and that is the cap water is recharged in Peoria.
Cap water is recharged in various locations.
But a lot of it's in Peoria, right?
We
In the
have a
north?
recharge facility in Surprise, Hieroglyphics, which is in
Okay,
our...
but are we using that a lot?
We don't know. And the reason I say that is we order cap water, and they send it to the recharge facilities that are either in play or next in line or available to accept the water. Some other basins may have received water before some delivery. We can designate, or at least request, that they put it in Hieroglyphics and put it in Agua Fria, which is in Peoria, but that doesn't mean it's actually going to those places. The Hieroglyphics had a failure recently, and so no cap water went into Hieroglyphics.
Right.
Part of that investment, for example, would be to work with CAP to actually, instead of use open basin retention and percolation, we build some wells and accept it through wells, injection wells, and direct
Right
it
off the canal.
right off the canal.
See, that's right there.
Then we can guarantee that the water that we buy, the water that we order, stays in Surprise, goes in Surprise.
And what kind of an investment would that require?
A lot. Actually, it's not
I
as
can
much.
handle it. I understand it's going to be more than 2 zeros.
Yeah, it's probably 7 figures in order to be able to take the amount of water that we order. And if we get, presuming we invest in CAP too, when numbers become available, it'll be greater. But we're at Vadosone well costs are $500,000 a piece. Let's say to take that amount of water, we're probably we could be in 20 of them. I mean, you can't. We have to have redundancy, and we have to shift them. We have to shift them, and allow some to drain and fill the other ones. So that's big round numbers, Mayor. But that's kind of what we're looking at.
But it's financeable.
I'm sure it's financeable. With financing, we can figure something out.
And is it impact fee financeable? I'm going to look to our CFO for that question.
And it depends on if we're doing it for prospective growth.
Right.
So the component, if it's what we already have in place, and so we have to do that analysis. But if we're going to make some of these changes to prepare ourselves for future growth, then I believe the answer is yes, it is.
And my understanding is that other cities are also in preparation for future growth using impact fees to buy new wet water sources.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
But Madam Chair, it is just the sort of the first, the one time. It
Right.
will not take care of the ongoing.
The ongoing operation. Right. Understood.
Well, this slide right here doesn't have many words, but it's a big deal, you guys. So I want everybody to reflect on it for a minute.
Actually, usually when slides have less words, they usually do have more meaning. Less is more. So this is I think this is an important concept, and one that we should be looking at as well, because water is a big discussion item everywhere, and it just doesn't. Arizona's done a pretty doggone good job of dealing with water. We're way ahead of some of our neighbors, way ahead. But we're certainly not perfect. I know that the state Department of Water Resources has been, their funding has been significantly depleted because of many of the budget challenges at the state. And that is no small matter because I think it does limit their ability to kind of work with all of their jurisdictional customers to try to find solutions that are in sync with what our local jurisdictions are needing in terms of guidance from the state and the regulators. Councilmember Biondo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I read somewhere, Terry, now help me if this is, assuming this is correct, someone was describing, based on the importance of this slide, someone was describing that we really shouldn't call it a source. What we're really talking about is a temporary supply from which we can borrow that we have to pay back. And in that sense, we're really not talking about a source per se. Is that correct?
I think it's a fair statement, yes.
Further questions? Okay.
Okay, we'll keep moving. So we've seen the next few slides before, but wanted to provide you with an update that the Water Subcommittee and staff
Terry,
have been
real
working. Yes,
quick.
sir.
I want
Vice
to,
Mayor?
I'm sorry.
I know you get excited.
I know. I don't want to skip over this because let's say we didn't recharge, we didn't figure this out, and we went to CAG RD and said, can you recharge for us?
We'd have to pay, and I won't quote a number there.
But it's a lot bigger number
Yes.
than us doing it.
That's correct.
If we go to the Central Arizona Recharge Groundwater Replenishment District and say we can't recharge because we don't have enough to recharge, or blah blah blah, and that's, oh yeah, we'll do it for you, and they just send us a bill, a big bill.
That's correct.
Right, Terry?
Yep.
Okay, so I want to make okay.
Good point. Councilmember Tandy.
Thanks. The end of the discussion will be, we need to invest in this type of project. But is this type of project one of those projects that if you don't do it, the community as an entirety suffers? But if you do it, you actually enhance the value of the whole community. So that's right. Thanks.
Good point.
We become much more marketable, showing we have a sustainable water portfolio and program to keep that portfolio going. Okay. Again, these are some of the recommendations, actually all of the recommendations that our consultant provided. I wanted to provide you an update of the work that's been going on. The Water Subcommittee has directed staff to, or advised staff to look at these things, but I also wanted to point out those areas of investment also. So investigate groundwater conditions within our service area. That is underway. Mayor and Council, you have approved in our operations budget some modeling, and we are going to be modeling each of the special planning areas as we roll out budget year over budget year. And so we're looking at specifically the SPA 2 area, and what that does is it looks at us at a local level. The basin study that Vice Mayor Hall mentioned was regionally, West Valley regional. This drills down even further into Surprise Regional. We'll start out with each of the SPAs, number 2 being the one we're moving forward with. Acquire extinguishment credits required from development. $ there. This one is one where we should look at development that has taken place or has not taken place, and find out what they're doing with their water, and make sure that if it's in our area, that we have an opportunity to take advantage of it. Water rights usually go with the land. The owner can keep it. The owner can get rid of it. We have to make sure if he chooses to get rid of it, it lands in our lap. Store 100% of cap allocation. Not saying it's done, but we're funded for this year and for the foreseeable future. We'll keep that 100% funding of the cap allocation. Store 100% of reclaimed water in excess of direct use. This we are doing right now, but as we talked about in the previous slide, we're doing it at a local, very local location. As much as the ground beneath the plant can handle, it's going down. Aside from our commercial customers, as well as a relief partnership we have with the farms to the south of us, most of it's going into the ground. Excuse me. Explore partnerships with EDCOR and other water providers. This is an opportunity for us to maybe potentially be able to use water from other areas outside of us hitting our designation. If we can get water from other areas either in a temporary fashion or in a permanent fashion for cheaper than what we provide, that saves our designation, and we become a customer of someone else. Doesn't mean we're going to go that route, but it's an opportunity I think we need to explore as a business.
Councilmember Tandy?
You mentioned a couple times about the recharging being done locally near the south plant. What would you actually be doing then to get it to the local? Would we be building a pipeline and taking it from the south plant, moving it up there, or are we going to build another facility in another location and also inject straight from there, or both?
Very good question, Councilmember Tandy. The intent is we'll keep those basins at the south plant. They're excellent shape. They're relatively new, but we would be plumbing and sending plumbing throughout the city into areas that kind of centrally located where we have recovery wells, so that we're putting it back in the area where those wells are. So yes, we would be plumbing.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, Tara, do you happen to have or maybe you can tell us, EPCOR's service area does not go north of Bell outside of like Jackrabbit Trail, does it?
It does not go west of the Perryville alignment, I believe. It might be the Jackrabbit alignment. It does go north of Bell, but yes, you're right. It doesn't go west. It goes north of Bell and then takes out, for lack of a better term, takes out Sun City Grand, Sun Village, and so forth, and moves on to Sun City West.
But for new development, I'm talking about like the new development north of Sun Valley Parkway.
Mm-hmm. That's our service area.
That's our service area.
That's correct.
Besides, I mean, we all think about Asante and Roland's existing district where there's development going on. But I just want to remind everybody, north of Sun Valley Parkway, where there's a lot of entitled lots out there. Mm-hmm. That's our service area.
That's correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Someday the balance may tip in terms of who the service providers are, just because of those entitled lots already in our service area.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Continuing on, investigate water accounting delivery opportunities with MWD. This one we have not moved forward with, but the MWD at one point, well, I shouldn't say one point, is still a major player in irrigation water in the West, and there may be an opportunity to partner with them to utilize water that we have rights to that can be wheeled through their canal, or purchase water that they have that we can utilize for, the options are endless. It all depends on what we want to invest in. But we have not started with that recommendation yet. Investigate long-term storage credit market through the market and market acquisitions. This is where we just buy. These long-term storage credits are a commodity, and there's availability out there. If someone's looking to offload some, we can purchase those. And while that says long-term storage credit, that does include cap allocation. That does include other rights associated with an owner or a particular property. And sometimes the right goes with the land, and so then we'd be looking at land purchases or something like that to take down the rights associated with that land. Continue water accounting practices of 100% credit recovery. That probably should be a green checkbox. We do that right now, meaning we're well within our safe yield, meaning we're putting more into the ground than we're taking out, and that means we're in the positive side of safe yield. and here's the kicker again, which we spent some time on before, is store and recover water in the same area of hydrologic impact. Again, that's where we would be sending that water that we treat back out into our system and put it near where we take the water out.
Okay. I would like to have a better sense of how we can do a better job of using gray water and distributing it through our community. We've got quite a few golf courses in the city. None of them are using gray water, which seems like a shame. And those golf courses are kind of an important element, not just to the communities that they are in, but also to the community as a whole, because you got a lot of people that come in from outside of the community that utilize those golf courses, and there's a lot of gray water to be had, and why not try to find a way to better utilize it and connect it up to the communities that want it for their landscaping, for the golf courses. I think that is an important thing to consider.
Sure. Yeah, I think, but the mayor brings up a good point. We brought it up in the water subcommittee meetings also, but there's a trade-off. If we move the water to communities that want it, then we're not using it to recharge.
That's correct.
And so there's a
happy balance.
There's a push-pull there,
Mm-hmm.
and I just want to make sure, because I came off the same way. Hey, let's get that pink pipe going, or purple pipe, or whatever it is, to some of these other communities. But then we're going, wow, we're taking that. Then we're not recharging that water. And the economics of it is we're probably better to recharge it. I mean, we need to talk about it.
We should certainly talk about it.
To extend the purple pipe. And I think Sun City Grand uses MWD water.
That's correct.
Don't they? Mm-hmm. Sun Village uses MWD water. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Coyote Lakes uses. We investigated Coyote Lakes. And bringing water from Peoria down was going to be totally price prohibitive.
Yeah, they use raw water from a
well. That's right, from an EPCOR well. They use raw water, untreated. That's right. Yep. And then I'm not sure about Happy. I think Happy Trails uses MWD too.
My best guess is that north of Bell, west of the river, uses rights associated with what once was farmland. The rights that and
that's coming out of Lake Pleasant for the most part.
That's
right?
correct.
So it's untreated.
Untreated.
It's untreated. Yes.
So, is there though technology that kind of hits all points, so that you're able to utilize it to water the surface, but you're still able to find a way to recharge it through the distribution of it over a larger space like that?
Very good question. Technology, I'm not sure, doesn't mean it exists. There is a happy balance between what do we deliver and put on the surface, and what do we transmit and put back in the ground. And to your point of utilizing the purple pipe, the reclaimed water for landscaping, the benefit is as we're sending this out, these mains out into the city to recharge the aquifer through wells, we can tie on HOAs that are nearby. We can tie on others that are nearby. It doesn't account for our recharge credit, but what it does do is it offsets the water that we send them that is treated, that is from the ground. And so there's a happy balance there. The golf course one would be a little bit more difficult in a sense. We don't have any wells in that area, and so I don't know what we would be recovering, but their right to the MWD water, of which there's a caveat with Sun City Grand in a sense that actually I'm going to confuse the matter really wholeheartedly here, but we actually sell them our available credits so that they can utilize water. This was an old agreement that happened before my time, but we actually make money off of some of our available credits that we have by selling them the credit, so they can use the MWD water on their turf. That's Sun City Grand alone. I can't speak for the other.
So who gets the credit in Sun City Grand?
The association that manages the golf course.
Okay. Interesting.
But it's a good point, and it's something that needs to be considered, because I'm with the mayor on this. If there's a way that we can, so as an example, Sierra Verde gets our purple pipe, right?
That's correct.
Okay, but it only goes up to Litchfield Manor. Does it go across the street to Litchfield Manor?
Litchfield Manor gets our water too.
But
Sierra Verde-
West Point does not.
West Point does not. West Point is not in our service area. There's a little notch
Okay.
out there
Okay.
where,
A little joke.
Okay.
and they
But we could do Royal Ranch,
sure.
right? There's some places we could impact. I think the rest of the council just needs to see an analysis on that.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Yep.
And so if you could do that. that'd be good, Chair.
Phase 2 of our integrated water master plan update is going to eliminate the options that once were out there because we didn't have a direction, and we're going to pinpoint down to where we have a direction. And again, the reason those guys could tie on is because we have that main running up Litchfield Road that I'll show you in our later presentation. We have the main running up Litchfield Road that goes over to the Bell Road Lake right now and is actually a dead-end line. So I'll show you some avenues we're going with a project that we can actually utilize more of that line, tie on more people. City Hall, Civic Center here is plumb for purple pipe, and we have a CIP this year to tie us in to the purple pipe as well. So
Definitely.
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 Okay. But anyway.
Councilmember Tandy.
Thank you. This water stuff's complex stuff. It's got its own economy. What I think, because I was thinking Copper Canyon Ranch is right across the street, literally from the plant. And I know they don't have it, and I've talked to you about that.
Sure.
But what would help us, I think, is if there was a sources flow chart all the way through the uses, showing maybe each type of different cost, source, credit, and I don't know how that's going to get pretty complex. I don't know if you can get it on one page. But if you had developed something like that, then you might be able to start strategically managing, or at least giving us the, where we know. And maybe we'll all go, hey, we want all purple pipe. Maybe not for an economic reason, maybe for a sustainability reason. But it gives us the ability to see that, and then we can make decisions based on that and set policy. But yeah, the really critical economy of water, and that, to me, I'm a numbers guy, that'd be really interesting to see, like a process flow map all the way from sources, all the way down through uses, with all the credits, costs, types of different arrangements. And I don't know how
When would you like
can
that?
do that, but
Not in
I'm
the
all
next
for
10
trying to
minutes.
digest
Okay,
it.
fantastic. Not a problem. But I think you're on the right track. To start is send it to where we pull it out. We got wells in the northern part. We recharge down there. We got to. Then what are our options? What do we have available to us to help maybe offset that treated water that's going to common area landscape, median landscape, those types of things.
Right, and I would definitely weigh heavily on your advice and recommendations of where we need to go, what the best decisions are, because you look at this all day and we're kind of part-timers on water, so.
I completely understand, yes.
And as part-timers, we are so grateful to have you on board and to have all of you willing to look at this in depth and understand it. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's see, these are some long-term recommendations. Again, I got a dollar sign by each of them. And investigate the feasibility of constructing increased city-owned recharge for cap and reclaimed water. We really talked about that pretty heavily tonight. The cap water is one where we partner with them to get that cap water directly into the ground, and it stays in Surprise. Investigate the feasibility of a surface water treatment plant for direct use of cap. That several cities do that right now, where they are treating cap water as opposed to recharging it. They're treating it. There's economic trade-offs with building a plant. Right now, it's not wise. We don't have much development up and around where this plant might go, but in the future, it may be an option. Monitor and participate in water supply opportunities, fund placeholders, refundable deposits. in a nutshell, it's look at all avenues in order for us to get water, and investigate opportunities to access waterlogged areas, supply areas. And Skip mentioned it in his opening. The waterlogged areas are the ones that they have water, but it's not of good quality. It would take some significant treatment to do that. But on a regional scale, if enough cities put their heads together and it becomes an option, we certainly should be a stakeholder in that new plan as opposed to just a customer. So we're investing. So what needs to be done? I only have one thing on there, and it's invest in our water future. Invest in acquisitions, fund projects to, again, get that water in the area of hydrologic impact, support conservation efforts, and support and fund regional water resource solutions. We touched upon all of those tonight, but the key is we got to invest. So looking ahead, we'll talk about a water conservation policy tonight. In December, look to have the use of reclaimed policy for you, and it'll become a lot more clear as to what's the benefits and what we should be spending our time with when it comes to reclaimed. And then for FY16 budget or sooner is to bring on some personnel that are water portfolio focused, similar to if you were a hedge fund. You want a hedge fund manager to manage these assets. You're a personal financial planner. That's what we need to look at. Having someone that understands this, speaks the language, way
And this would be
better
funded
than
out of the enterprise fund.
This would be funded directly out of the enterprise fund. That's correct. And then funding requests for water acquisitions once again. I think that's the last one.
Okay. Any questions, council members? Councilmember Tandy.
Because of the importance of this, I'd be for trying to figure out a way to do it sooner than 2016. So matter of appropriations through the enterprise fund. Sounds like you've got the fund balance. You can fund it right now and get going, but it seems like if we're trying to tee everything up and be ready to really be running really fast here in the next year or so, that'd be kind of a very important part to wait for a year after everything else is up and running.
I would agree, and as a matter of fact, we do have, as we pointed out in that wonderful chart with the red lines, we do have competitors out there, and they will be investing as well.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to be asleep at the switch. So I think we should be, yeah, and we do. So all the more important that we need to keep this discussion in mind when we sit down in our summit to talk about picking that number and figuring out what we want to do and putting together the strategy, because we don't want to buy a bus if we need to buy a car. But by the same token, we do need to figure out what model car we need to buy. So I think that this has been really helpful, Terry. Thank you so very much for putting this together. And Vice Mayor, I want to thank you and Councilmember Winters and Councilmember Williams for diving in on this subject matter. It is complicated, and it's helpful to have a couple of, granted you might not be graduates of the School on Water Economics, but you are definitely really well on the way to having a much clearer understanding and breadth of knowledge of the subject matter of water. And that's really an important asset for this council to have, is partners that really are diving down deep. So I thank you all for your devotion to this subject matter, because it's one that's going to be with us forever. So thank you. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Tara, could we talked about doing like a 2-page white paper for all the council, summarizing in a way what we talked about tonight and some other things about water.
Absolutely, Vice Mayor. It may go beyond 2 pages,
could you do that
but sure.
for us, so that, because Councilman Biendo goes to Sun City Grand, has meetings, people ask about water, and Councilman Winters, all of us, people ask about water because Arizona Republic has written a lot of articles, and it's gotten a lot of press lately, and so people are asking the question, so I think the more educated we are as a group, and that we can articulate that. And the mayor's she's out with having these conferences, you know, with residents. And I don't know if water's come up, but I'm sure it will come up.
It will.
And so the more armed you are
Right.
to talk about it, that,
Right.
you know, we're on it. We know there's an issue. We're working on it. And we plan on fixing it. So,
Absolutely.
anyway.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I am conscious of the time. It's 16 minutes after 5. We have a 6 o'clock council meeting. We have a small break for, do we have a small break for dinner, sir? We do. And so we have 2 items. I don't know how long the presentations are for each of these. Can you kind of give me a guesstimate?
They're fairly short, and a lot of the slides are redundant, Mayor, because
Okay.
these were done.
So, given
separate
that, I'm looking, I just wanted to point out that it is the first inning of the World Series. And our Royals are out there trying to bring it home. So I just wanted to give a shout out to our Royals and point it out that if we could be sitting there watching it tonight, we would be there with them, but we are thinking of them. And we hope you all are too as well. So with that, if you would move to the next item.
This is a presentation and discussion pertaining to a proposed water conservation policy.
Madam Chair, members of council, before I begin, we had a clerical error. The policy that was attached to Novus is actually a prior draft version. The one that went to the subcommittee, reviewed by the subcommittee, is in hard copy. I believe you have it in front of you now. If not, I would certainly work on getting that to you. All set. Tonight we'll talk about our first policy from the Water Subcommittee. Give a quick brief background, the specifics on the policy, and the next steps. Back to our roadmap, we're just wanted to point out that we're in an 18 to 24 month time frame. We are right on schedule to getting our water strategic plan right there. Tonight's our first policy, and if we look at the next 6 over the next few months or so, we will be right where we targeted for 24 months ago. So again, you know, this is the policy portion of our strategic plan. It will provide us with the foundation for sustainable water management. Seen this slide before. So the purpose of our policy, you know, again, provide us framework, set examples for the residents, support grants and other possible funding mechanisms, allow for proper information and adoption of executed related water conservation initiatives by all staff. The conservation policy, and you probably, if you read the former draft, it has much of the meat that was there, but the final copy the final draft version that you received today provides it all. It's very overarching. It's a council policy that will provide for many layers of conservation initiatives that can be brought forth with you. Falls right in line with our strategic plan as well. So the focus of the policy itself will be use of innovation. I'll just read these off and then I'll talk about a little of them, and I'll talk really fast too. Best management practices, development standards, education, local and regional partnerships, and then program planning. The use of innovation is one where a mayor brought up the use of technology. This is where we will look for not necessarily the guinea pig in new market items, but areas where we can instill, adopt products, innovate. Thank you. I didn't try not to repeat myself twice, but new products that we can adopt so that people can save water through our code, through our ordinances, you name it. Best management practices. This one actually is pretty self-explanatory. It's laid out by ADEQ, ADWR. They have best management practices. We practice it now. We have to show the state that we're utilizing those. We're just going to continue to do that and exceed the minimums where we can. Development standards. This is part of that area I talked about before, land use, water management. It kind of goes hand in hand with them. The development standards associate with, and our planning group does a very good job of encouraging development to be water conscious, no grass in the front yards or limited grass in the front yards, trees and plants that are more native. This solidifies that and provides for the fact that when we bring new development standards forward to council, that it falls in line with your vision of what we're doing for our water. Education, again, something we do right now, but it's something we can certainly enhance if we'd like to invest a little bit in getting the education outreach of the importance of water, of conserving, and through programs at the next level than what we're currently doing right now. Local and regional partnership, again, something that we do, but we need to stick with it and stay with our local and regional organizations and be a part of those each and every step of the way. And then finally, just program planning. It's allowing for the development of new programs as we move forward. Again, very 50,000 foot level, but this allows for us to bring forth initiatives to council so that we fall right in line. It also, once we have this solidified, we seek potential grant funding, or at least programs to say, this is a surprise, we're planting our flag here. And that's part of this policy. So our next steps, very briefly again, use of reclaimed water will be our next policy. And then in January, we'll talk about water acquisition. And again, the intent is to solicit your feedback, put them all together, we'll package them up, and bring to adoption probably sometime in June or so, June or July. That's what we're looking at.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Terry, I know this is a subject that some people are saying, well, that's not a good measurement, but it's a measurement, and that is the gallons per capita per day. And when I talked to EPCOR got back to me. They attribute 150 gallons when they look at a development. That's what they, it's 480 per household or something, but based on 3.2 people per household. And so it comes to 150. But their actual gallons per day is 109.
It's very good.
So that's very good. And I just want us, and I know Tucson's the best in the state, and they're in the 90s.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, the reason is they really took a proactive approach in xeriscape landscape because, as we all know, most of the water is used outside of the home, right? Is it 60%, 65%?
It's a very good chunk is used outside of the home. Exactly.
So I just want us to keep in mind, I want us to look at that metric and work toward it. I mean, it's not a panacea. It's not the silver bullet, so to speak, of measurements, but it is a measurement that I think we need to keep our eye on, Terry. Okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And
Thanks.
to that point, it also makes a really big difference when you've got people. We have a significant number of residents who spend their summers not here, but they have irrigation systems that are breaking down and failing, and that water could run forever before somebody figured it out. And yes, they're paying a bill for it, but guess what? We're all really paying a price for that kind of waste. So we need to find a way to build that into our policies as well, to try to figure out some way of dealing with our irrigation systems. I had my irrigation system replaced, and overnight I reduced the amount of my water usage by 50%, which was a pretty big deal. So, and my plants look better than ever. So that is a big deal. I know how much was just being flushed, and I would find squishy parts of the land, and the rocks looked wet, and I'd go over and put my foot down, and sure enough, it was saturated. So there was a lot of leakage going on. Makes a big difference.
That's right. And I saw the policy in our policy. I think we talked about 10% water loss.
The measure of lost and unaccounted for is 10%.
Unaccounted for lost water.
Need to stay.
Lost water revenue or something.
It's basically just lost water. It's unaccounted for. We haven't been able to tabulate where those.
We want to keep it under 10%.
We want to keep it under 10%.
But the numbers I looked at were closer to like in the 6% area.
We were averaging, last year, I think we had an anomaly there. We're not quite sure, but we were in 9, but the previous years we were 6 and change and something like that.
Right.
But yes, the goal is to stay under 10 as best as humanly possible.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Councilman Tandy.
Thank you. I know this isn't your area, but if we can also, if we're talking conservation and different ideas like that, if we can also work with our other department, community development, maybe with building codes for, maybe we encourage people, or maybe write it into the code, to have recirculating pumps for hot water, so that, it's a $300 item, and maybe that for new construction, that's just part of what we do, so people don't run the water forever until the hot water gets there. And then the counter to that is, and this is something that I'd really like, because I think we've kind of gone in the wrong direction, is for getting the cold water. I guess the new building standards are it runs the pipe through the attic and it superheats the water, so you're getting not cold water but hot or warm water for the cold. And maybe there's something that we can do to look at that for the building codes.
Councilman Tandy, you tell me there's cold water in Arizona? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I don't think I've brushed my teeth in cold water in 13 years.
To me, there's things I think we can do from a building code standpoint that, hey, maybe we get known as the city of surprise, the Arizona city with cold water. So, and I think there's some things we could do there and just make that as part of our building code standards.
Sure.
Interesting. Okay.
We did,
Vice Mayor.
thank you, Mayor. Councilman Tandy, we did talk about in the subcommittee meeting, and Chris, Boyd, and Bennett.
Bring them.
Brigham. Gosh, I don't know why I want to call him Bennett. Brigham
That's
joined us, and we talked about doing some kind of incentives, but the recirculating pump thing was an idea, but we didn't want to use it. We wanted more to look at it as a carrot rather than a stick.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, Terry?
Yeah.
That's kind of the way we looked at it.
And the key to moving forward with codes is where humanly possible, get the buy-in from those that'll build.
Right.
Some areas where we could possibly enact some things is in areas where they're not building right now, meaning certain sectors, either industrial or commercial, and where we are building in residential, we work with them to let them move the needle, and then it basically becomes normal, and then we can adopt a code or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But,
You done with that one?
I'm done with that one.
All
yes,
right,
ma'am.
next item. Last item.
Presentation and discussion pertaining to water conservation within the Bell Road right-of-way.
Everyone's favorite subject. Now, I guarantee there isn't a single local meeting that this subject matter is not brought up. So we've all been waiting to look forward to this particular item.
Okay, Madam Chair, members of council, this is the Water Subcommittee's first stab at or precipitate, again, lack of a better water term, precipitate out of the previous presentation on conservation to conserve water here. I'll just go through some brief few slides and kind of outline an idea for some projects, or just present for you the options of what we can do with Bell Road and water. So talk about quickly Bell Road by the numbers, some background on the road itself, the current state of Bell Road, benefits of reducing the water use, which I think most of us believe is fairly obvious, the recommendations and options, and then some next steps. And so, like I said, the Water Subcommittee wanted to really look at this as the way to really put our money where our mouth is as it relates to conserving water. So just by the numbers real quick, the length of Bell Road from Grand Avenue to the Beardsley Canal is 6 miles. This is the area that has the turf within the right-of-way, median, sides, north and south. The approximate area of that entire right-of-way is 960,000 square feet. The amount of turf in that area is 460,000 square feet. I rounded.
That is amazing.
The current source, while it is MWD water and it comes from either Wells or Lake Pleasant, depending on where they are, it doesn't go or stay where it's supposed to go. So while we are utilizing non-treated water to irrigate Bell Road, it doesn't usually stay where it's supposed to be. So a little bit of background. I found some interesting slides. 1979, west of Grand, Bell Road was not paved. It was then widened to the 4 lanes in the 80s. You can see the 1986 picture shows the 4 lanes, and that brought it to Beardsley Canal. Didn't go beyond Beardsley Canal. I don't have any picture, obviously, for today's present day, but in 97 is when it went to 3 lanes in each direction and jumped over the Beardsley Canal, and the Sun Valley Parkway was born. 1986, Bell Road Lake was constructed as a reservoir for the right-of-way landscaping as we know it today. So this is the reservoir where MWD water, because it comes in, we order it by time. The volume needs to be put someplace for when we need it. The lake was there. I don't have a 1979 slide, just it didn't exist in this area, so I went back to 1969. But the key in both of these pictures is, my mouse is going to work here, there it is. There's this little patch right here, which equates to, it's over here next to the patch, which equates to this area right here. This is an agriculture well that was dug in the 50s or so. And it is out of service right now, but the city of Surprise owns it. And so there's an opportunity to utilize this well. It doesn't go down as deep. Again, it's still raw water, but it's an ag well, so the water quality is not real good for anything but irrigation. And as I talk, I'll bring that back up. So just keep that in mind. So a little more background. So in 2006, Bell Road Beautification Project was started, but it was everything east of Grand. Did not get finished, economic downturn, and the project was put on hold. And then in 2009, also, pavement preservation, which was a full reconstruction of the west side of Bell Road, occurred in 2009. And I'll tell you why that's important in a minute.
Real quick, how
Yes, ma'am.
much was actually completed of the project east of Grand?
Percentage-wise, very little, Mayor. We put the monument sign east of the Friendship Bridge, and then
Okay.
we put the terracotta street lights up, and then it was stopped. Yep.
Okay.
So the current state right now, that lake is fed from MWD. There are 2 pumps there that pump the water from the lake to the right of way, and so that pump is beyond its useful life. It currently is current CIP project 21-410 is to replace those pumps. It's unreliable, obviously. High energy use, and the reason it's high energy use is that those pumps run 24 hours a day, and I'll show you why in a minute, to keep the lines clear. There's a lot of maintenance, obviously, and then the last one is why they run 24 hours a day. There's mussels in the system, and I'm kind of a little show and tell here, which is these are shells for mussels that we pulled off of that screen right there. Heavy maintenance intensive, heavy electric bill, and so what we're planning on doing again is to replace those pumps, and that well, if that well can be put back in service, we can eliminate those mussels that occur in the lake, in the canal system, in Lake Pleasant. That's really where they're coming from. So the pipe itself, the delivery pipe, we're dealing with one pipe that runs the full 6 miles. And so that too is unreliable, but we think it's unreliable because of the pumping system that's in place. We're trying to push water through a straw, and you can only get so much at one particular time. So if we can push less, still water some things, but it may save the life a little bit longer, at least get the pipe to not be as unreliable. And then finally, the Bell Road pavement in certain areas is aging prematurely. We're seeing that it's alligatoring pretty good, especially along the medians. Excuse me, there may be some undermining, we're not quite sure. But really, the surface observations are that it's aging a little bit more premature than we thought. So, again, for obvious reasons, the benefits of reducing water. First and foremost, we set the example for our residents that this amount of water usage is no longer acceptable, and in turn it becomes a waste. Asset preservation will save the life of our pumps, our road, maybe the pipe. That may be an ongoing maintenance issue since it's 30 years old. And then obviously the ongoing cost of maintenance and landscape maintenance. We reduce some of the water intensive items on the medians and in the right of way. The amount of landscape maintenance will come down. And then obviously the cost of the water itself. So recommendation that we've got, and kind of like the last slide, we only have one, and that's remove the grass. That's the first one, is take out the grass within the median. And then we've got a couple options. We can replace it with DG. We can replace it with DG and some plantings, native plantings that use very little water, if any. Replace it with artwork, and then also potentially replace it with artificial turf. The numbers there are from the original project from 2006 or so. I put them there not necessarily for the cost value, just to show the sort of the spread. Given the fact that 2006 was fairly a high time in construction costs, we wouldn't be too far off, but we'll have to verify that. And so from that, we'll develop a CIP project to incorporate number 1 and some option of number 2. A couple slides here just kind of showing the artwork. Yogi Berra once said, if you come to a fork in the road, take it. That's from California. The one in the middle is actually Mesa. You see some pieces of art down the middle there heading towards the US 60 interchange. And then the one off to the right, which I think is really nice, you notice there's no plants in that median. That's in Las Vegas. And so those, you got a steel cactus and a steel something else. And there's some other slides that show various other pieces of artwork there. So it's an option. Getting back to that 2006 project, Mayor and Council actually had envisioned some artwork being in there. This is the old renderings, and if you see it, one location we had some gabion, what they call gabion baskets or pedestals for potential artwork there. So there was some thought through it at one point in time. Wanted to bring that back up. The landscape palette can stay the same or change as we see. So just really looking at some of our savings options there would, again, annual landscape maintenance with that, removing the turf. We reduce, this is just Bell Road, we'd be looking at about $80,000 to maintain Bell Road from a landscape perspective. The irrigation equipment and maintenance, total about $49,000. Again, that includes pumps, it includes electrical costs, and then miscellaneous parts and pieces that we utilize in the equipment as well as in the irrigation system. And then finally, our water reduction savings. And the reason I say 100% is that if we incorporate that well that is in good shape for irrigating, we don't have to pay MWD anymore. We will be taking them out of the equation, taking the mussels out of the equation, and we can utilize that well for the remainder of the plants, the remainder of the of whatever we've got left that needs water. One thing I do want to mention is that by no means am I the aesthetics expert here. We will certainly work with the planners and community development to really make this thing pop. So these are just proposals, and again, I am not a I'm a left brain type of person. It will be better than what I show here. So, and that is that reducing that water is part of that project that we have on the books currently right now.
Councilmember Williams.
No, I just want to advocate right away, and I think I talked about this in our water subcommittee meeting. I am in favor of no grass, no plants. I like the idea of art, and there's so many possibilities with that. It can be thematic. We can acknowledge our veterans on there with monuments along the roadway. It can be desert landscape models, artwork. It could be something that showcases the Royals and the Rangers. I mean, there's so many things that we can do there with zero water, and zero maintenance, not having to have anybody go on there and maintain that. I really feel strongly about that, and I think we can do that slowly over time and do a really good job with it.
Councilmember Winters.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree with Councilman Williams. I think it's good. I don't think we want to spend $1.6 million in artificial turf for 6 miles. I think we can eliminate that right away. But the decomposed granite and maybe some tall trees, they're not water soaked up, and some of the other things on that meeting would be good. Yep.
Councilmember Tandy.
Thanks. I guess I have a different opinion. I actually like landscaping, and we don't have as a city a landscape policy? Do we prefer medians citywide, or? And I think of Bell as kind of our signature boulevard, but only because Bell's the most done, and we don't have Greenway Parkway done. We don't have the other parkways done. So I think there's a need for us to come up with maybe a city policy that makes the whole city kind of look like it makes sense. I would be for landscaping. More walkable community needs to have, I've heard, the term canopy, and there are other examples in the valley where we've got native plants and other plants where we can actually make that happen. And so that's kind of where I'm going I'd like to see a policy developed citywide. I don't necessarily need to want to stop the Bell rehab because of some of the different things, but I do want to make a couple comments. As we proceed on some of these things, I'd almost kind of like to have more of a business case presentation, so we know what the payoff is. To me, it kind of ballpark kind of makes sense, but I'd like to have the water cost savings and all that stuff factored in, so we know, here's how much it costs, here's how much it saves, and what's the payback exactly. And the reason for that is, I look at this as, a road that's been in for 25 years or so with landscaping and stuff. And so we're already going to go rehab and take out and put new in something before, and this is what our job is, weighing the different policies and what we're doing. Why aren't we doing Greenway first? And why aren't we doing, any number of streets first? So, and again, I'm hoping I'm laying it out. To me, Bell's the main road, but only because it is the main road, because we haven't done the others. So if we, I look at this project as more of a, okay, let's take a look at it, use it as a test case for building a business case. Let's help develop the policy for the rest of the community. And again, I would not like total zero-scape, because I look at some of the other communities, and even Sun City, which was, it's got kind of a combination, some streets that are total zero-scape and some that they're removing grass, which I think they're probably right in doing that. What I like as an example is the Sun City Grand neighborhood. Their landscaping is fantastic. Mm-hmm. And my guess is, without knowing what their water costs are, it's probably not too much. They don't have a lot of grass. When they have grass, they have a little splash of green on a corner or something. And actually, that makes it pop and it makes it look really nice. Now, whether we use real grass or the new artificial turf, which is actually excellent, we've got an example right here on Bullard where we have artificial turf. The caveat on that is that we need to maintain it, so I think it needs a vacuuming or something right now. This is a good, worthy project because you're running up against some maintenance issues. But what I'm hoping is that we can, out of this project, develop a citywide policy of how we look, maybe develop a landscape maintenance district for our arterials, so that we have a way to fund all of this, so that the whole city can look the same, rather than just, we got one Grand Avenue and or one Bell Avenue. And the others, well, too bad you don't get any of the same look or treatment. So I'm looking at trying to figure out a way to enhance the entire community rather than just one street. And this project, I think, gives us an example of maybe let's use this as a test case to do that. Not to slow it down or stop it, but it brings up a lot of good policy questions I think we need to address.
Councilmember Tandy, I want to chime in support of your concept, because I think you might recall that last year during the budget discussion, we talked about putting in kind of gateway markers. Mm-hmm. And many communities have done an extraordinary job of creating a theme that is throughout their entire city, using gateway markers and then internal markers that really are art. They really are art, but they also serve a purpose. I'm all for taking that grass out.
Yeah.
But because that's where the real problem is the irrigation of that grass that just drips all over Bell Road. But I'm like Councilmember Tandy in belief that we really should have should be thematic, and it should be consistent throughout the city. There should be a policy that makes it consistent, so that when you know you're driving down Bell Road or Reams or Greenway or wherever, you know you're in the city of Surprise, because there's something about that that's very thematic, very much like Goodyear does. I think they do an extraordinary job. They had the same issue on Litchfield Road, for example. You recall they have the very large palms, and they had this beautiful lush grass around the palms along in Litchfield and the median, and they ripped it out, and they have crushed granite around the palms. It's beautiful. I think a lot of people just hunger for trees, some kind of canopy of some kind. I know that Councilwoman Villanueva has talked about streetscape for a long time in the OTS. I think that there's a way of beautifying a good portion of our streetscapes with plants that are natural to the desert and making it look good. So I appreciate the recommendation from council members that think that we should just pull the plug on all of it, but I think we need to find a mixed balance. And I think we've got some really talented people in our planning department that can help us come up with, especially some new folks that have done some already amazing work already on kind of just laying out how things could work, and working with all of our folks that have been around for a long time that have, I think that probably in Chris's drawer or somebody else's drawer in planning, there's probably all kinds of plans and drawings of different ideas of what it could look like. So I think it's time to dust off those plans and figure out a way that makes the whole city look unified. Okay, so Vice Mayor, you had another question.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'll just weigh in on this. We must have 150 palm trees. I mean, I was trying to count them doing 45 miles an hour, but I almost got in an accident. Okay, but we need to count on that. But I'm telling you, that entrance, our east entrance, or excuse me, our far west entrance coming eastbound, coming in Surprise, is our best entrance into the city. Okay, and the palm trees, I think, are very important in my opinion.
They make it.
They really do make it. I mean, so, and we're talking about water reduction and all that. Palms don't take much water, but that's the reason they survive in the desert. But us removing the grass and doing whatever. I mean, I'm sure our Rick and the new land planner can come up with something that really complements the palm trees and visually, and that don't take much water. But removing the grass, I think, is a huge thing, and it'll set the example. Because I can't tell you how many times I've had a constituent say to me, well, you guys are on the water committee and you're talking about saving water. How about saving water on Bell Road? And so it's back to us setting an example. And so anyway, that's all.
Do you have a comment? I have public speaking station. Who's asking to speak at the public speaking station? Pardon me? Oh, okay. That's all right. All right. So, any other council members who want to weigh in on the issue of what we do with Bell Road? I think most of us agree. I think we all agree. We're ready to remove that doggone grass, get it out of there, and let's move on. We have a consensus? Super. Okay. So do you have a remainder of this proposal?
Oh, I have
We
one
have
more.
10 minutes
I have one
until
more
the
slide,
next
Mayor.
meeting.
And I'm cognizant you need to have a break here, but part of the intent here of this presentation also was obviously to look at that whole grass on Bell Road, but also to incorporate potential savings that could be had in 21-410. If we remove the grass, we don't need to size the pumps so large because they're not pushing that much water, and work on maybe some of that savings could go into starting that grass removal. We'll have to see how funding plays out, but I think the intent is let's not buy a pump large enough to service grass if it's not going to be there in the future.
Right.
The difficulty is that we have 6 miles of it, and we're only going to be able to take out a section of it. But having said that, part of the project could be maybe we tackle it with this project is Vice Mayor alluded to the palm trees not needing as much water. We look at all the plants and say, do we need water to go to these plants still? Maybe it needs to be cut back or capped or something along those lines, and utilize that approach. We have master gardeners on staff that can look at the plantings themselves to see maybe we don't need to even irrigate that much. But to kind of visualize a phased approach, which we could bring forward in a CIP project over a couple years, if you so choose, would be to again break the roadway up into sections. We got to start at the west side and work our way east. And so there's the initial costs and then the savings of each of those sections. But as we work through the project 21-410, we can refine these numbers as we need to for the project themselves, as well as look at changing out some plantings that planning believes to be not worthwhile anymore. So, with
Councilmember
that,
Tandy?
Thanks. If you can put that chart back up. A couple comments. One would be, mentioned maybe coming east to west or west to east?
say that again. I'm sorry.
Which direction would you come?
West to east.
We're going west. We're going west
West
east
east.
because the end of the pipe is at the west, and our pump is over here at Parkview, and so we
Okay.
gotta.
So
bring the water
logistically, with the replacements, that might be the best. One consideration to factor in there is we've got a year before the Bell Grand gets done. Is this going to impact any of that, or does it not go all the way over?
There will be a section where that project is impacted. The funny thing is that the right-of-way in the western side of the city is wider, has more grass than the eastern side. So we will take out some with the Bell Grand project, probably right where the Chick-fil-A is and a little bit further to the west, but not very much. So it takes a little out, but very low impact, I would have to say.
Okay, and I know we want to get to the break real quick, but where I was going with the business case analysis, on the chart just before, we had $49,000 for irrigation equipment, $80,000 for landscape maintenance on the 100% of water. But on this chart here, the last chart, well, it adds up to the $49,000. It just takes care of the landscaping. So if we can have kind of like in the future the full accounting of not only all the costs and all the savings and then what the payback is, make it more of a business case. That makes it a lot easier for me to evaluate. And then again, as we're doing that, hopefully we're going to get to our CIP presentation next month. Hopefully we'll see a lot of these different things because we need to weigh priorities, what goes first, what's next, and hopefully we have some of that data to base that decision on. Thanks.
Okay,
Good, Terry.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Terry. Yes, we did. We covered a lot of things. A great deal. So we do have one speaker this evening in Call to the Public. Ken, right? No? Okay. Thanks for giving us the break, Ken. Okay, so I will entertain a motion. We have about 7 minutes until the 6 o'clock meeting, so we might be a few minutes drifting past 6, but I'll entertain a motion. Motion has been made and seconded to adjourn this meeting. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. This meeting is adjourned.